just put the right amount of flux on. And what we'll do is we'll do the hard bit first, namely the giving a good generous amount of solder onto these just to make sure that they've got a good connection and a good mechanical connection. According to the notes, all we need to solder of these two are the outermost pins of this. But I'm going to do all of them, may as well. I don't think they're connected, but at least they'll be soldered on. Yeah. Here's the idea with this. I just have to keep cleaning my iron, applying a bit more flux, and it will eventually come good. Yeah, I think we've got it. Hooray! Now we have our little surface mount electrolytic. So again, being electrolytic, this has got a polarity. As you can see on the silk screen, they've got this black stripe, and of course on the capacitor itself it also has a black stripe. So we just make sure that those are aligned together. Again, we shall use just about the right amount of flux. Just trying to hang it a bit better, sorry. And again with this, we're going to hold it in place. And we didn't quite get it. These can be tricky. That seems to be it. So I'm just trying to lift it in either direction just to make sure that both joints are sound. They don't always solder quite so easy. So that's all of the surface mount components. Basically everything that goes on the underneath of this. Now we get to flip it over and start putting on some of the LEDs. So one thing you might come across, this is now a bit unsteady. So even though I'm not going to be using these later on, I'm just going to put in the standoffs just to help with working on this so it's not wobbling around all over the place. I'm only doing these up with finger type. No need to crank down on these. Now you may be wondering, which way round do the LEDs go? Right. Well, if you notice on each of these set of four, let's find something finer to point with, one of them is a square tinned hole. You can see it's this one I'm pointing to. Same over here. You've got a square one, the rest of them are sort of oval. Well, the square one corresponds to the longest pin. So it makes it a little easier. This one, it would be there. there is one thing with this particular central one, is that the leads can't go through because the integrated circuit is on the other side. So for this one we are actually going to have to crop these leads down ever so slightly. I'm going to leave the longest one, I'm going to leave that slightly longer than the others. So I can crop down these outer ones so they are, and then there we go, and then crop down this inner one just slightly, but leaving it still long enough. Hopefully this is the longest. Put these together. This central LED sticks up the highest, and then this ring around here is slightly lower. There we go. So let's just double check that I've got the longest, longest pin going into the square. Now it does say in the instructions that you can power this up and just double check that you've got everything in the right place. So why don't we try that? Hey, look at that. So yep, that wouldn't light up if it was the wrong way around. And going through the various colours there. So that gives us confidence that we can solder this into place. And what I'll do is I'm just going to solder one pin, and then I can get this vertical because it tends to flop around a bit. So I'll just solder one of the outer pins. So now see if we can get it vertical in that plane, vertical in that plane. Although of course you would be able to bend the leads. But getting it vertical side to side is not always possible if you don't reflow the solder. Well, let's see, how's that? Oh, a bit too much. That is a little bent, but that can be solved by just easily manipulating that. Now these are a pain for soldering. Let me zoom you in just so you can see. There we go. Do you see how close together those pins are? These are awful. You need to be really careful. Use plenty of flux and only a little solder. Leaning tower of LED. So it's the two inner connectors that are the most challenging to do. I think that's okay. The outer ones, they're much easier because you can just, you've got room for your soldering iron. And now to assist with the spacing off the board of the other LEDs, there's two ways you can do it. Because the next row down round is just not quite as tall as the middle one. So you can put it through until it hits the ground. There you go, you can see the difference in height there. Or I have also printed out a little 3D printed thing which allows them to go a little bit lower. to access these from underneath to be able to solder them. So all you need to do is solder one lead on. I was just holding it on with my finger on the other side. And you can see that slides out fairly easily. I'm going to leave that on for the moment just while I get another lead tacked in. I'm going to do the easy one, the other side, just to be able to get this tacked on. Now we know that won't move, and we can just pull that out. So if I get one on the outside just popped in, just so you can see the height difference. There we go. There's sort of a fairly even step between them. So Amazon to the rescue. One of their reels of tape is going to be big enough for this to fit into. That makes it a bit easier. I could work at this from the other side, but then these leads are longer or taller than these standoffs, so we're still with the same problem. No, that didn't quite. There we go. It's a fine line between getting enough solder to make the joint and too much, which will flood it and give you a bridge. There we go, that looks okay. As you can see, they're very close together. There's not much expansion on those solder mask. So it'll be just more of the same. And now we're getting these, you see, by using a jig, they'll all be at the same height. Now some may wonder, well, why not just crop down the leads that you've soldered, in fact crop them all down and then solder the middle ones. Now, I've tried that before, and I find what happens is I get a lot of solder bridges, and the advantage of doing it this way, if you do get a solder bridge, which if I manage to do, I will of course film that for you. But if you do get a solder bridge, whenever you've got the leads like this, you can melt the solder and then just drag up or stroke up the leads to bring the solder bridge up and away from the bottom. And once that's done, you can clip the leads when there's no solder bridge. So while it's a little bit more awkward, it's actually worth doing and leaving the leads long. See, there you go. There's one. There's a bridge. Just add a bit of flux to it. Hopefully this will work as it has before. Just by bending it over like this, leaning it down, you can have gravity also helping you. You have to remember that not to overheat the leads. You don't want to overheat the LED. Do it for a little bit and then just give it a little bit of a rest. Because these pads are so close together, it's inevitable that you will get some, and there we go. That should be it. Clear, I think. Let's have a bit of a closer look just to see if we're okay with that. It's just flux residue in between. There's no actual solder bridge. So it's just a case of more of the same. So I just wanted to share with you what method I've found most successful for soldering these very fine pads very close together without getting as many solder bridges. I'm still getting them. It's a real pain. But basically, spread the legs once they're through, just a little bit. And that has really helped. Put a drop of flux in, and we'll get our first joint done so that we can stop having to hold it. It seems on this particular PCB that it sucks quite a bit of heat out, and so you have to have the soldering iron on for a lot longer than I would be comfortable with normally, but it seems to be working okay and it's not damaging the LEDs so far. So we space those out as much as possible, then again using lots of flux on this, and on the soldering iron just a very slight tinning. I clean it between every joint, and then you come in and press down onto the circuit board, and there you go. Hopefully that's very close to bridging. There's probably not enough solder on that one. Just a tiny bit more. There we go. And of course the end one is the easier one to do. And that's the method that's been working for me. I just got to check to see if there's... It seems like it's not. Let me just try with the old continuity meter. So no short between those. So that seems to be the key for these, is to insert the LED and then really splay the leads as much as possible just to create that little bit of extra space.